Gentleman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for 2 introductions and a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has floor.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, today we have members of the Virginia Young Democrats, which is in its 80th year of operations here, from over 40 high schools, college, and young professional chapters throughout the Commonwealth. We have members here today from Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, Richmond, the Shenandoah Valley, and Southwest Virginia. And don't think they could make it in the gallery, but I hope we would. Oh, they did. I hope we could give them a welcome. We also have coming into the gallery members of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, which is an African-American organization of mothers who nurture future leaders by strengthening children ages 2 through 19 through chapter programming, community service, legislative advocacy, and philanthropic giving. There are over 10,000 families in Jack and Jill, which is the oldest and largest African-American organization in the United States. Here in Virginia, there are 10 chapters in the Charlottesville area, Chesapeake, Hampton, James River, Lynchburg, Midlothian, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Richmond, and the Roanoke Valley. The members believe that every child with proper guidance and opportunity can be a leader. And the aims are to aid mothers in learning more about their children and careful study, to seek for all children the same advantages which we desire for our own, to support all national legislation and state legislation aimed at bettering the conditions of all children. And I hope that we would give them a welcome as well.
We're very pleased to have such a large group with us today, and we thank you for your attendance.
And for a point of personal privilege. Mr. Speaker, today I rise, as every year, to honor the memory and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., the drum major for justice and a man of many gifts. He was born on January 15, 1925 in Atlanta, Georgia. At the age of 15, he entered Morehouse College, where he earned a bachelor's degree in sociology in 1948. A consummate scholar, Dr. King received his divinity degree from Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania, at the age of 22. And 4 years later, he earned a PhD in theology from Boston University at only 26. He was 32 years old when he gave that famous speech in which he told us of his dream, and he was not yet 40 when he was killed by an assassin's bullet. Today, as we remember and celebrate his life and legacy, I'm struck with the fact that we are still wrestling with and resisting change in many areas of society where Dr. King courageously fought to gain equality during his life. Such things as eradicating poverty and ensuring equal educational opportunities, voting rights, health care, economic justice, and employment, particularly for minorities and the masses of people, whom some refer to as the 99%. As many of you know, I'm privileged to serve as the Vice Chair of Virginia's bipartisan Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Memorial Commission, and we do some very important work. We are charged with continuing Dr. King's legacy and perpetuate that legacy here in the Commonwealth, making the Commission one of the busiest legislative commissions in the Commonwealth. We are working in concert with the King Center in Atlanta to help educate and enlighten citizens concerning the totality of Dr. King, beyond his image as a civil rights leader and social activist. We've come to understand and appreciate King, the man, son, husband, father, pastor, visionary, orator, thinker, educator, historian, author, philosophy, peacemaker, prophet, social activist, and the many other hats he comfortably and ably wore. Poring over his work, I am simply amazed at how timely and poignant many of his utterances are today. As we begin our work as advocates and representatives of the people of Virginia, I believe it would be worth asking, what would Dr. King say about a few things? We know what he said. Many of his words still resonate today. In the area of education, he was a respected scholar and an avid supporter of lifelong learning. He understood the importance of education and its relationship to employment and the welfare of society. As we debate the future of public education in Virginia, teacher benefits, curriculum, closing the long-standing and unacceptable academic achievement gap between African Americans and other students of other races, Dr. King reminds us that the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of a good education. Moreover, he stated, schools have to be infused with a mission if they are to be successful. And the job of school is to teach so well that family background is no longer an issue. Dr. King astutely understood the nexus between education and employment, and that parents should be involved in school to the greatest extent possible, breaking down barriers between professions and community that are severe. And he often stressed during his fight for economic justice, education is more than ever the passport to decent economic positions. Amazing. After 50 years after his death, education is still the passport to economic security, and yet it's out of reach for so many. In the area of poverty, even after our effort to deal with the needs of the poor, success continues to elude us. In Virginia, over 750,000 persons, including 250,000 children, live in poverty and are poor or are highly concentrated in inner cities and along the state's southern and southwestern borders, with growing clusters in the suburban areas. Current economic recession compounds the challenges, and analysts believe that the rate will increase rapidly in the next few years because of the recession. We have faltered on too many occasions and squandered the opportunity to live up to the principles and the precepts upon which our nation was founded. Too many citizens have not had or even been given an opportunity to share in the American dream. And it was Dr. King who declared, "The curse of poverty has no justification in our age. It is socially as cruel and blind as the practice of cannibalism at the dawn of civilization, when men ate each other because they had not yet learned to take food from the soil or to consume the abundant animal life around them. The time has come for us to civilize ourselves by the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty." In the area of health care, Dr. King fought against racial discrimination. Discrimination, he said, is a hellhound that gnaws at Negroes in every waking moment of their life, to remind them that the lie of their inferiority is accepted as truth in a society dominating them. Despite great strides towards racial equality, African Americans remain stigmatized, marginalized, stereotyped, and burdened by the lie of their inferiority told so many years ago and so many times. Although the shackles of slavery and second-class citizenship have been legally broken, too many African Americans still find themselves manacled to a substandard health care system if they can afford health care at all. African Americans have higher rates of chronic and debilitating diseases that other groups, such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, obesity, infant mortality, and HIV/AIDS. And unfortunately, one of the most glaring disparities in health care is in the African American community. And Dr. King, in addressing the second annual convention of the Medical Committee for Human Rights on March 25th, 1966, stated, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health care is the most shocking and inhumane." And in the area of voting, for which he's most known, after passage of the Civil Rights in 1964, Dr. King turned his attention to voting rights in the state of Alabama, which came to symbolize this struggle. In his speech, "Our God is Marching On," delivered on March 25th, 1965, Dr. King said, "The Civil Rights Act of 1964 gave Negroes some part of their rightful dignity, but without the vote, it was dignity without strength. In focusing the attention of the nation and the world today on the flagrant denial of the right to vote, we are exposing the very origin, the root cause of racial segregation in the Southland. Let us therefore continue our triumphant march to the realization of the American dream. Let us march on segregated housing until every ghetto or social and economic depression dissolves, and Negroes and whites live side by side in decent, safe, and sanitary housing. Let us march on segregated schools until every vestige of segregated and inferior education becomes a thing of the past, and Negroes and whites study side by side in the socially healing context of the classroom. Let us march on poverty until no American parent has to skip a meal so that their child may eat. March on poverty until no starved man walks the streets of our cities and the towns in search of jobs that do not exist. Let us march on poverty until wrinkled stomachs in Mississippi are filled and the idle industries of Appalachia are realized and revitalized, and broken lives in sweltering ghettos are mended and remolded. Let us march on ballot boxes. March on ballot boxes until race baiters disappear from the political arena. Let us march on ballot boxes until the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs will be transformed into the calculated good deeds of ordinary citizens. Let us march on ballot boxes until the Wallaces of our nation tremble away in silence. Let us march on ballot boxes until we send to our city councils, state legislators, and the United States Congress men who will not fear to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with thy God. Let us march on ballot boxes until brotherhood becomes more than a meaningless word in an opening prayer, but the order of the day on every legislative agenda. Let us march on ballot boxes until all over Alabama, God's children will be able to walk the earth in decency and honor. Full of wisdom from above, and to get a blessing to America, Dr. King can be instructive on a multitude of issues today. As policymakers, as servant leaders, let us be mindful that as we conduct the people's business, that it is always the right time to do the right thing. On the night before he died, in another famous speech, speaking of threats against his life, Dr. King said, "Well, I don't know what will happen to me now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter to me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. And I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And while we have come a long way since that fateful night, we still have not reached the promised land. We still have a long way to go. But as Dr. King also said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Let us work and live together in the spirit of Martin to truly make Virginia a commonwealth of opportunity and these United States a land of beloved community. And so, Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourn today, that it do so in the memory and honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
The gentleman from Richmond City, Mr. McClellan, moves that when the House adjourn today, to adjourn in the honor and memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. As many as favor that motion, will please